You're listening to Switched On Australia, the podcast that tracks the opportunities and challenges of electrifying everything, everywhere. Switched On is brought to you by the publishers of Renew Economy, Australia's best informed, most read website focusing on the green energy transition, and is supported by Boundless Earth, using philanthropy, investment and direct advocacy to help Australia become a global force in a decarbonised world. Hello and welcome to Switched On. I'm Anne Delaney, speaking to you from Arakwal country, part of the Bundjalung Nation in northern New South Wales. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, we're currently seeing a lot of suspicion and resistance to big renewable developments in some of the regional areas of Australia. And some of this is obviously fuelled and weaponised by anti-renewable forces. But some is because big renewable developments aren't building appropriate relationships with local communities that host these developments. So it's interesting to read that the Clean Energy Regulator's latest quarterly carbon market report showed that last year, Australian households and small businesses led the renewable energy charge, not big renewables. More renewable energy capacity, 60%, was installed on rooftops in 2023 than was connected from large-scale renewables. And whilst the focus has been on big renewables and consumer energy resources on the other hand, a growing force in the energy transition is community energy. Local community energy projects around the country are not only providing additional renewable energy to the grid, they're enabling communities to feel involved and directly benefit from the renewable energy transition. And whereas large-scale renewable projects are invariably focused on industry needs, community projects are more likely to win hearts and minds for the energy transition because they focus on the needs of the community first and foremost. And they're usually run by passionate, committed volunteers with less vested interests. Dr. Jarra Hicks is the co-founder and executive director of the Community Power Agency. And I spoke to her about the role of community energy in the energy transition and the barriers that currently impede the sector. But I started my discussion with Jarra by asking her to outline the main benefits of community energy compared to large-scale renewables.
Yeah, I think there's a few. So, first of all, in the type of energy transition that we're going through at the moment and the 80% renewable energy target that we have, we need all scales of renewable energy in order to meet that target. But there's a really special and important role that community energy can play, and it does deliver a range of benefits that you don't get with large-scale projects. Community energy projects are fundamentally driven by the community. So local people are involved in initiating them in response to a local need or a local, ambition, such as, taking action on climate change or helping households reduce their energy costs or wanting to increase the resilience of their energy system. So communities are fundamentally involved from day one. They're involved in setting the projects up, in financing the projects, and in reaping the benefits of the projects. And through this, it means that people learn a lot. They gain a lot of knowledge about how the energy system works, how renewable energy works. They bring a lot of people in their community along on that journey. So it demystifies the technology. It helps it to feel safe and understood. But it also, brings people in as investors in renewable energy. And so they're emotionally and financially invested in these projects, and they reap a financial benefit, but also benefits in terms of, the community being on board with the idea of renewable energy and the transition to renewable energy. Community energy projects are also at a scale that makes sense for local energy demand. So they're projects that might be working on energy efficiency or energy generation or energy storage, but it's at a scale that makes sense for people, makes sense for the local community. And, because of that, it's able to plug into the distribution network. And the distribution network, which is the lower voltage network, has a lot of there is a lot of opportunity to use that network to be able to grow our renewable energy generation capacity without building additional transmission lines. Yeah, so I think there's a whole bunch of different benefits from this scale of renewable energy generation, and just by involving people more intimately and more directly in the transition, it demystifies it, and it helps people feel empowered about, what is the energy future we want, and how do we want it to benefit our communities.
It makes us all more energy literate, I think, as they say.
Absolutely.
What about comparing, say, some of the community projects compared to the benefits of co-owning some of the large-scale generation projects? Because there's some discussion about that now. So, rather than these companies coming in and, as we've heard, some communities feel that they're being roughshod over. How would you place the benefits of co-ownership, communities co-owning some of those larger projects?
I think co-ownership is a great opportunity as well. So it delivers some of the same benefits as community energy, but not all of them. But co-ownership is an opportunity for regional communities who are hosting transmission lines, hosting large-scale renewable energy projects, to be directly involved in that, and to be reaping the financial rewards themselves as well. So it's about keeping some of the financial benefit circulating in the local economy. And I think, that's something that I would love to see a lot more of. I think if a community is hosting a wind or solar farm, it'd be excellent if they can also invest in it and have that direct benefit and that direct relationship with that project. But I guess in terms of community energy projects, it's just a different layer again. The community is that bit more involved. They're literally making the decisions about that project. They're involved in all of the decisions that need to happen, and what that project looks like and where the benefit is accruing. So there's just different layers of benefit for different kinds of projects.
And that actually goes to the heart of the fact that there are lots of different types of community energy projects. Is it possible to define the different types and give me some examples of some key ones that are currently working, that you think are working?
Yeah, sure. So community energy, I guess it happens in that scale that's larger than what you can do in your own household, but it's smaller than what you generally see at a utility scale at a large corporate wind farm or solar farm. So it's generally in that range of like 100 kilowatts to 10 megawatts, say. They can be energy generation, so they might be, a small scale solar farm or a small scale wind farm, but they can also be energy education and about helping people understand their energy use, understand how they can be more efficient with their energy. They can also be about a community based approach to demand management. So, for example, if you're a community at the end of a very spindly line, such as the Denmark community over in WA, and they were experiencing major supply issues at peak periods. So they get lots of people coming at Easter time as tourists to visit their beautiful town. But often the grid would crash in those times when there's more demand on the energy network than usual. And part of what the community energy group in Denmark did was to work with their network operator to do a big program around demand management. So helping the community understand how they can be more efficient, how they can stabilize the demand for electricity, and how they can respond when the grid is overloaded, how they can reduce the demand on the grid. But that community group also went on to set up their own small wind farm. So Denmark Community Wind is a two turbine wind farm that the community has invested both their time and their money in to get it up and running. And now it is up and running. They of course are selling their electricity into the electricity market, and they earn an income by doing so.
Mm. What other models can you talk about that you think are highly successful and a good place for communities to start?
A lot of communities start with doing like a bulk buy model is is a really popular example. So in this instance, the community energy group would do all of the organising and the background research and the vetting to find a really great supplier for, say, solar panels or batteries or even electric vehicles. And they would work with the community to understand the technology, and they'd sign people up, and they'd do a bulk purchase and install of that technology. And many groups across Australia have done these kinds of projects with great success.
Mm.
I guess back in the early days when solar was still quite expensive, it helped to reduce the costs of solar. And then now we're seeing those same kinds of benefits with community batteries and electric vehicles, and communities organising bulk buys for those technologies. And it helps to demystify the technology and to break down the barriers that might exist. So I think for a lot of community members, they're like, oh, yeah, solar and batteries, that sounds great. I'd be interested in that. But just trying to understand all the different options and understand, who's a supplier they can trust, what's a product they can trust, how to integrate it within their household and how they use energy. So the community energy project helps bring people along and helps them understand these options and helps them feel comfortable to actually make the decision to invest in the technology. And these types of programs have installed megawatts of energy
Mm.
on people's rooftops just by doing bulk buy programs.
One of the issues, or one of the hurdles that communities are possibly having is when they have to deal with some of the utility companies, the power companies. Tell me about that. How communities are going with that.
I think, community energy projects, there's a lot to understand and to learn when you're first engaging with the national electricity system. It's quite complex.
Mm.
And the way it's been set up, the way our grid operators work, and the way the national energy market works, is really set up for large players. For large centralized generation in one spot being shipped out to consumers all over the place. Whereas community energy groups, they're often not-for-profit organisations made up of volunteers, and while they can be very savvy and very well informed, they're also new to the energy game, and they're trying to play in a system that was not set up with them in mind. So there are definitely some barriers, but there's also just barriers for mid-scale projects in that range of above 100 kilowatts and up to 10 megawatts. For those mid-scale projects plugging in to the network, wanting to connect into the network, the approvals process is not really created with them in mind, and so there are definitely hurdles there. And I think a lot of the distribution network operators are trying to think about how they can better work with communities and with mid-scale projects, because that has been a barrier in the past. And I think equally, the policy environment can be very challenging for communities, and there's not a lot of support for them to be innovators in the space.
Are there particular policies and regulations that you think need to be changed to enable community energy to function effectively and to ensure that that they're not always bashing their heads against a brick wall to get their projects connected, for instance?
I think a lot of community energy projects are motivated to provide what we call network services. So, in a lot of communities, they may have faced reliability issues in the past, or they still have electricity reliability issues, and they're wanting to help address that.
Mm.
Or they're interested in doing a storage solution or a microgrid, or to help improve their energy supply and to go renewable. So in some instances, those projects can be providing services to the network. If they're in a part of the grid that does face some reliability issues, having a battery or having generation can help to stabilize the network. But we don't have a way of accounting for that service or
Mm.
valuing that service. So community energy projects in that instance would just be selling their electricity into the grid to an energy retailer, and wouldn't necessarily being recognised for the value that they're creating. So I think that that's being able to recognize those kinds of network services is a step. I think also being able to enable things like peer-to-peer trading. So a lot of community energy groups want to just be able to generate electricity and sell it in their local community, but there's no easy way to do that at the moment. There's a whole bunch of regulations that make that quite difficult to do innovative, basically energy retailing options.
Jarra, you've studied a lot of community energy projects around the world. Is there anywhere that you could point to that is doing it better than us?
I think there's a lot of countries I can think of in Europe and the UK who have they've been able to set up programs to support communities to engage with the energy transition. So through local advice services, through grants, through loans targeted to them, through grid connection processes that are tailored to their circumstances. And in these countries, there is a recognition that supporting communities to directly engage and benefit in the renewable energy transition has a net benefit for the whole country. It
Mm.
helps to build a social context where renewables is understood and where there is broad support for the energy transition. And so, in Australia at the moment, we've got really ambitious renewable energy policies, which is great. That's what we need for meeting the demands of climate change. But we also need to make sure communities are brought along in that journey and able to
Mm.
participate directly and benefit directly. We need to build a level of social understanding and support for this energy transition. And community energy is a great way to do that.
Mm. Can you give me some examples of international examples? Because you've been to the Isle of Skye, I know, and also looked at what's happened in Denmark. Can you talk to about some of those projects? Because they've got long histories, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was on the Isle of Skye, I was talking to people about a wind farm that had been set up in Skye. And Skye is a very historic and a very scenic part of Scotland. There was some concern and some pushback about there being a wind farm on Skye. But one of the things that the developer of this wind farm, it's the Ben wind farm, and it was developed by a very large renewable energy developer company called Folk Renewables. They decided to partner with the community and to enable a local cooperative to co-own the project. And what that did was directly involve a whole bunch of people from the Isle of Skye, who are now literally, emotionally and financially invested in the project.
Mm.
And that really helped them to build relationships into the community, helped them to build trust into the community, and it also connected all of those community members. There's over 600 people who've invested into that project. It connected them with the success of that project.
Mm.
And so, when I was interviewing people, they were saying things like, yeah, at first I was a bit nervous. I wasn't sure about it, but I've been able to understand the technology. And now when I see the turbines, I feel part of it. It feels like it's part of my community, and I know that it's bringing a direct benefit back to this place in terms of, environmental benefit, but also financial benefit and financial returns to the people who invested, but also through a community fund that the wind farm established, and that funds important initiatives in the community.
And did the community approach the wind turbine developer, or was it the other way around? Did the company approach the community?
It was actually brokered through a third party to some extent. So there's a not for profit organisation called Energy for All, and they had set up a community owned wind farm in the north of England and had it go really well. And Energy for All actually developed a partnership with Folk Renewables, and then Energy for All were able to work with the community to help them set up the local cooperative. So it was sort of a process that benefited from those three different organisations all being involved in the process.
And do you think a third party like that would be useful for Australia at the moment, given the contention around particularly some of the wind farms here?
Yeah, I think the benefit of a not for profit and community minded third party is that they can broker trusted relationships in a community, and they can bring a lot of the expertise and the knowledge needed to do something like a co investment program. It can be a lot for communities to get up to speed to be able to do something like that. So, their assistance in setting up and mentoring the local cooperative to be able to take up the co ownership opportunity was really, really valuable. And in Australia, we haven't seen that kind of relationship happen yet, but there are some. There's a fractional investment platform called Domacom who have helped to facilitate a co-ownership stake in a wind farm, in the
Hmm.
Sapphire wind farm up in New England. So we've got some precedents in Australia, but we it'd be great to really see a lot more happening in that space. I also just wanted to mention when I went to Denmark, I saw like Denmark, the country, um, as opposed to the town in WA. So when I was in Denmark, I spoke to community members who had invested in wind farms there as well. And Denmark actually introduced a requirement that 20% of all shares in all new wind farms be opened up for the community to co-invest.
Right.
And so, every single wind farm that happened onshore, offshore, had to open up for community to be able to invest. So it really, brought a lot of communities into the picture as part of the way their country was doing wind development.
Because Denmark actually has quite a history of community projects developing wind turbines, way back to the 1970s, I believe.
Absolutely, it's fascinating story. So Denmark in the late 1970s, they were suffering from a lack of oil. So
Mm.
the oil crisis was really affecting them. They relied on oil for most of their heating needs, and so the oil crisis presented this huge challenge for them in the lead up to winter. They were literally wondering how they were going to meet their heating needs, and backyard inventors and started working together to develop the very first prototypes of modern wind turbines.
Mm.
Of course, in Denmark, they'd been using wind technology for a long time in their classic windmills to grind grain and pump water. But these backyard engineers worked to develop the very first prototypes of electricity generating wind
Mm.
turbines. And they funded their endeavors through basically crowdsourcing from the community. And the very first wind farms in Denmark were funded through community investment, through community co-ownership. And when you go to Denmark, there's a fantastic place you can visit called the Nordic Focus Center, and they have a museum of these original prototypes made out of wood and fiberglass and but that technology is the foundation of the modern wind industry and actually has its roots in very much a community financed model.
Mm. Is it a case that the communities that get some of these projects up and running and successful, is it generally the case that they are a cohesive community before the project gets up? Because it takes it does take quite a while to get these projects off the ground. Or do you think it's more the case that they build the cohesiveness as the project develops?
I think there's a whole range. I think some community energy projects are really quite small. They're 100 kilowatts on the roof of a local not-for-profit organization, just helping that neighborhood house or that community preschool be able to meet their energy needs. And then there's much more ambitious and big projects, such as multi-megawatt wind or solar farms. So there's a whole range, and I think that some communities there's already they're already really engaged and very community minded and cohesive, but in other communities they part of the benefit is that they are based locally and they have to figure it out. They have to figure out how to have the conversations, how to bring people along, how to design a project in a way that is appropriate for their context. They're developed by people who live in that place, and so they're accountable to their local community members. So it's just very much founded in a very different relationship between communities and renewables projects. But I think community energy projects can also really face social challenges and have to work through those and find ways to navigate them.
I mean, obviously, community energy is very locally focused. It's from the ground up, so to speak. How big do you think it could become, though, as a global movement?
I think that there's tremendous opportunity for community energy to play a really important role in the energy transition. I think it's at a scale that is really accessible and makes sense for people. So, in terms of being able to win hearts and minds and bring people along, help them feel comfortable and understand renewable technology, help them feel involved in it, help them, benefit directly from it, there's huge potential for us to see community energy building that social groundswell of support that we need to do a whole scale transition to renewables. So I think the contribution might be more in terms of hearts and minds than in terms of megawatts necessarily. But that said, at present in Australia, we have over 30 gigawatts of rooftop solar. So a lot of this is household projects, but also community scale projects, and projects on the roof of businesses and on farms. And I think supporting communities to engage, have their own energy projects in the distribution network. We can supply gigawatts of energy, and that's ultimately what we need to transition our grid from coal-fired power to renewable power. However, that won't happen without direct support for communities to be able to participate in that way. And, at present, my organisation's advocating for the federal government to set up a program called local energy hubs, which is a concept of having 50 centres across Australia that are able to help communities understand and engage with the energy transition. And these would be places where community members could go for support to be able to do their own community energy projects, but also just to be able to understand the energy transition and understand the other types of large scale energy projects that might be happening in their community as well.
I presume you've put in a budget submission for that, Jarra?
Yes, indeed, we have. We have. We really see the opportunity for local energy hubs to play a super important moment right now. So we need to build social license for the energy transition right now. We need to bring people along and get them involved so that we can achieve the renewable energy targets that we need for climate change, but also just to keep the lights on. And we believe that these local energy hubs would really, they are fundamental to enabling everyone in Australia to be able to plug into what this energy transformation means for them in their homes and their communities and their businesses.
Now, Jarra, you're not only a researcher of community energy, you advocate for community energy, but also where you live, you're planning on a small community energy project. Tell me a little bit about that because it involves an embedded network.
Yeah, well, we're really excited about thinking about how we can meet more of our own energy needs because we live in a spot where we are very prone to blackouts. I live in a small, like 300 people community, and we have just one arm of the grid that comes up to where I live, and it has to travel through quite a stretch of mountain and forest to get to us. And in the 2019 bushfires, for example, when the bushfire came through at the bottom of the mountain, it took out our grid connection, and we were without power for 2 weeks. And in that time, we were surrounded by fire on three sides, and we lost our telecommunications tower because it couldn't keep running after its battery ran out. So we're motivated to increase the reliability of our energy supply, but also just to be more renewable and and also to reduce our energy costs. So we're in a pretty unique spot. I live in in a community, I guess you could say an intentional community. We're on one property boundary, but there are 7 homes. At the moment, there's 7 different grid connection points and 7 different meters, and we're all paying our own grid connection fees, and we've all got our own electricity accounts with our energy retailers. What we're looking to do is to replace that with a single point of connection into the grid, so a single energy account with an energy retailer. And within that, we'll have an embedded network. And so we will do our own sub-metering to each of the homes behind that one point of connection into the grid. And we'll also have our own on-site solar generation and battery and inverter. But because we can share the electricity between our homes within our embedded network, we can have just one spot, one solar array. We can, maximize some efficiencies in the way that we build our solar, and the way, we only need one inverter, we only need one battery, and it can service all of our households. So we're able to get some cost benefits through that.
And also only one network charge?
Yeah, that's right. Only one network charge. But, it's unique that we're able to do this. And what the enabling factor is that we don't have to cross a property boundary to be able to do this. We can do it. We're all on the one property already.
And so how far are you down the track, and what is the energy company saying about it?
We are still in the conceptual phase, I have to admit. We are working with our distribution network operator. They're open to the conversation, but we're yet to get into details. And we're really lucky that we've got a consultant who's working with us who's done this before and who actually used to work for the distribution company. So, that kind of insider and bespoke knowledge is really can be hard to find the right person to give you the right advice. So I think we're really lucky in that sense.
This would be something that could stand alone if need
Yeah,
be. If the power goes down somewhere else, a couple of hours away, you'll be able to have a standalone system.
So we're going to design it so that it can be standalone. So if the rest of the grid goes down, we can supply our own needs as much as our solar and our battery will allow. And that, of course, will enable us to be a bit of a hub in the community too. If other people lose access to energy and they need it for whatever reason to charge their radio or their phone or their whatever, then we'll be able to provide some of that to our community in the event of an emergency.
Well, best of luck with that. We'll have to come back to you to find out how it all plays out. Jarra Hicks, thanks so much for joining the Switched On podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
And Dr. Jarra Hicks is the co-founder and executive director of the Community Power Agency. I'll be talking to some of the other organisers of different community energy projects over the coming weeks. It really is extraordinary and exciting what communities are doing. Next week I'll be talking to Mike Casey from Rewiring Aotearoa. New Zealand is one of the first countries in the world to reach an electrification tipping point. Electric homes are now more affordable than fossil fuel alternatives. I'm Anne Delaney. See you then.